Right, we're recording. Okay, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Career World Mystery Moments. Let's see if I can just change with this view a second. There we go. I think that's good. Actually, we'll do it on that one. Welcome to the episode 2 of Career World Mystery Moments. It's taken a little bit of time to track you down, Brother Fisher. But I'm glad we've been able to get on here. We had episode 1 with Brett, and obviously episode 2 with yourself, following something that we've been doing in my mission, whereby people that have been on missions just kind of talk about their experiences that they've had. Perhaps to people that've never shared those too. It might be to family that you've never shared those experiences with, or perhaps even missionary companions that you've not spoken to for how long's it been, Andrew?
It will be 27 years this March.
So long
It's been
time.
quite a while.
So yeah, just sharing it with those kind of people. For me, it's been an amazing experience listening to other people's, as well as obviously sharing my own. So just to remind you of the format, what we'll do is first we'll hear about how you got your call, kind of the lead up to the decision to serve a mission, receiving that call, that's that whole story. Then we'll flip to after the mission. So what have you done since? For those people that have obviously not seen you for 26, 27 years, want to know what you've done with your life. No pressure. Hope it's good. And then we'll flip back then to the beginning of your kind of MTC experience, and then go through each area that you served in with anything that you want to share. So just as an idea for anybody that's listening, this is all framed in Andrew's memory. 26, 27 years. It could be factually incorrect, but it's his truth.
It probably will
So,
be.
yeah, you're going to share your truth though. So yeah, so go for it. Go for it. So tell us about the experience of deciding to serve a mission, why you decided, up through that kind of receiving the call, and how that was for you.
Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to share this. I felt as though I couldn't avoid you for very much longer. um, so yeah, I when I served my mission, it was from March 1994 to March 1996. Back then, they just changed the ruling that you had to be 19 to serve a mission. So I actually went when I was 19 years old. Prior to that, so I'd always been I was one when my family joined the church, and I'd always been an active member in the church. And in fact, for a number of years before I actually went on a mission, I was going on splits with the missionaries quite a lot. We'd go tracting the local area. I lived in Stourbridge, just outside of Birmingham. Um, and in fact, I was actually on a mini mission at the time when I received my mission call. So there was a four-man, the elders at the time in Stourbridge, there were four elders. One of them was ill. I can't remember why. He was bedridden for the best part of a week. So while he was in bed, I was actually serving on a mini mission. I'd stay over at their, it was a proper mini mission. I slept over at their house as well at the time. I had a call from my mom one morning to say that my mission papers had arrived. So I actually drove over there with one of the elders to look at my mission call. I had the kind of the build up towards that. I never really wanted to go on a mission as such. It was always my brother wanted to go more so, and I just kind of went with the flow, as it were. Really, I wasn't really forced on going on a mission. But then, probably from the age of 16 onwards, we had a really good spate of missionaries, and because I was quite close to them in age, I felt as though they were friends as well as just missionaries. And like I said, I used to spend quite a bit of time with them. And at that point, I just thought, this would be a pretty good idea to do. And if I'm being completely honest, I went on my mission. I'd always had a testimony, but I suppose I didn't really appreciate my testimony to the full extent until I actually served the mission. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But I went on a mission, if nothing else, for the adventure. I know that kind of is probably not the right reason to go, but for me, that was the motivating factor.
Yeah, but you went before they raised the bar though, so they were taking anybody, weren't they?
Yeah, they took anybody.
That's good. That's kind of it. We've done all the ones that I've listened to and done. It's kind of a similar experience that people. Well, a little bit different actually for you, because you never said I was always going to go. It was kind of that kinship, wasn't it, with the missionaries, that are around your wall at the same time, which is interesting because your son Tom, which again you'll get to in a minute, is I think is very similar in that vein. He just spends a lot of time with missionaries. Obviously they're just great to be around, aren't they? So that's
Yeah, yeah, they
very
are.
very good. So your parents converts, and then I suppose you were that kind of that first wave of that convert generation coming through to serve a mission. Fantastic, really good. All right, so come on, let's since the mission then. So in the last 26 years or so, I suppose, yeah.
Okay.
What have you been up to? Highlights of life, low lights. What do you do? What have you done in that time for those people that haven't seen you for all that time?
It's funny because I remember very clearly, quite vividly, sitting in my second area in Halifax, and I was wondering what I was going to do after my mission, and I didn't really have a clue. And then I caught a bus, and while I was traveling on that bus, I had an impression in my mind because I'd been pondering it for. We were on a P day, and I'd been pondering it for a good couple of hours. And then as I sat on this bus, I just had this overwhelming feeling that don't worry, everything's going to be fine. Everything is going to work out when you get home. And I wanted to share that with you first, just because you'll see that everything just kind of fell into place for me. I was kind of one of the fortunate or one of the lucky ones. So I got home on a Thursday in March 1996. The next day, my old young men's president, he came and visited just to kind of say hi to me. He was working at the church offices in Solihull, and he told me that there was a vacancy at the church offices at the time. So give this person a call tomorrow. So I received a name and a phone number. I recognized the person who I was meant to call because he was an old young men's president of mine from years back. So when I called him, he remembered who I was, and just said, "Yeah, we'll give you have a week to kind of just have a bit of a break, get your head right, really, and then start working at the church offices in Solihull, literally a week after my mission." So it was meant to be a part-time, well, not part-time, it was a full-time job, but it was meant to be a temporary job. And that turned into a 5-year job. So I stayed there for 5 years while I did a business degree. I did my degree part-time. At the church offices, I did various different things. I worked in the treasury department, then I worked in the accounts department. So I ended up working as an accountant, looking at reconciling financial records for different missions. And in fact, one of the missions I looked after was the Leeds mission, and I actually went back there and did some training with the financial coordinators within the mission a little bit as well. So I did that for 5 years, and then a friend of mine started working as a pharmaceutical rep, and then basically there was a position that came up there, and I'd literally just finished my degree, and you needed a degree to work in the pharmaceutical industry. And he said, "There's a vacancy here. Why don't you go for it?" Well, I'd got no selling experience other than the experiences that I had as a missionary, really. So I basically went for a job interview in my lunch break at work. I was offered the job. I had to then go on an assessment center, and there were experienced sales reps that were turned down for these positions. I was offered the job, so I accepted, and I started working within the pharmaceutical company, and I've been doing that for the last 20 years. So I basically sell drugs to doctors and nurses. So I go around to, and it's funny anytime anybody hears that you're a drug dealer, but I sell medicine.
You sell medicine, not drugs. Good.
Yes, I do that, and I also work part-time. I've got my own little photography business as well, so I do wedding photography as well.
Go on, give it a plug for
Uh,
millions of people that are going to watch this.
yeah, for the thousands of people out there, if you're getting married, then my website is andrewfisherphotography.com
Yeah.
or .co.uk. We'll get you to the same place.
Cool. So I'm glad you've gone through all the important things in life. Anything else gone on in the last 26 years? You get married, have any kids or anything like that?
Well, nothing like that. Nothing at all. Yeah, so I've been married for the last 20 years. Jenny is the lucky lady. And we've been blessed with three children as well. I've got a 19-year-old. I've got two boys and a little girl. Tom is 19. Josh is 16, and then Isabel, she's 11.
Yeah, and a fine family you are too. And Isabel's not that much of a little girl anymore. She's tall.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
she is.
everyone's getting really tall. Cool. So that's what you've been up to in the last 20 odd years. So I want to go back a little bit. When I received my mission call, there was one place I did not want to go to, and that was Glasgow.
Mhm.
People making fun of me for weeks leading up to me receiving my call that it would be Glasgow. Are you going to go to Glasgow, Valor? And then I spent over a year, about 13 months in Glasgow, in the Glasgow Central Ward in Julian Avenue there. So when you received your mission call to Leeds, which is what, two missions up? Or
Uh,
just one? Because you were in
back then,
Birmingham mission, weren't you? One
yeah.
mission up. Okay, so you just going the mission next door. Did you have any, what were your thoughts and feelings about going to a mission so close? Do you think it's going to be good or bad? Or how did you feel about it?
So, like I said to you before, I was on a mini mission at the time, and I remember driving over to my house, opening the paper, and just before I opened the envelope, I knew that I was going to serve in the England mission, somewhere in England in the British Isles. And my thought process back then was, I don't want it to be London. Purely and simply, I just thought it was a big city. I just didn't really want it to be London. I knew I couldn't serve in the Birmingham mission, obviously because I live there.
Yeah.
So for me, I just thought, well, apart from if you take out Scotland and Ireland, which I didn't necessarily want to go to, it left kind of Manchester, York, well, Leeds or Bristol at the time. And out of the three, I just thought, well, actually, Leeds would be great because I could drive. I just pictured myself driving around the Yorkshire Dales and all that sort of place. And I just thought, actually, that sounds really, really nice.
Yeah.
Or this is just the naivety, obviously, of an 18-year-old. Or Bristol would be quite nice, driving around Cornwall and that sort of like the coastal areas. So I was actually quite surprised. I was pleased when I got my mission and mission call and found that it's Leeds. It was one of the two that I wanted to go to.
Ah, there we go. You got what you wanted. Doesn't always work. I didn't want to go to Scotland. That's really
I
good.
mean, if don't get me wrong, if you'd have given me the choice to go abroad, I probably would have. But
Yeah.
actually, in retrospect, it was probably good for me personally to serve in my home country.
Yeah. Well, I think the same thing because we've been able to go back multiple times and see all the people. When you go to the temple, there's always people from Scotland in the temple. And it's
Yeah,
nice to see, isn't it? So, but from the kind of an 18, 19-year-old's perspective, if you've got your heart set on somewhere, or the opposite, if you got your heart set on somewhere you do not want to go, and then you get that area, that's a faith tester. It was for me anyway.
yeah.
So why did you know that you got back on a Thursday? That's really random that you'd remember the day of the week that you were back.
I don't know. I just knew that it was a Thursday.
I got back on Thursday. That's such a Yorkshire thing to remember, isn't it? Fantastic. All right, so that's what you've been doing since, and that's kind of the lead up to it. So let's dive into the mission then. So your MTC experience would be different than mine, simply because my MTC didn't exist when you were called for your mission. So take us through your MTC experience, and then we'll head to the mission.
Yeah, so back in 1994 at least, there wasn't a Preston Temple, so there wasn't an MTC at the Preston Temple either. So the Missionary Training Centre was actually on the grounds of the London Temple, and it was if you ever go to the London Temple, you might even not even appreciate that there was anything there before. There was some nice, I want to say kind of like Tudor style building, and the MTC was actually inside there. It was actually quite a small group. We were only there for 12 days. And I would say there was probably about 25, maybe 30 people maximum in there. So it's a massive difference, a contrast certainly to Provo and, to perhaps even Preston, where you've got a lot of foreign missionaries there as well. I think the only foreign missionaries that we had over here there were a few people learning Spanish. Other than that, there wasn't any foreign classes or anything like that. So, yeah, it was just a small group really, but it was just a nice experience. I remember my parents drove me down to London, I was that excited to get in there. My mom and dad were all in tears and crying, and I just couldn't see what the fuss was all about. So, so I remember just, and my parents would laugh that I went on my mission despite them,
Yeah.
because they always said to me, "Look, if we have our way, we'll have you stay at home. We're not going to make you go on your mission, but also we're not going to stop you from going on your mission either." So they kind of left it to me to decide, really. So I went on, like I said, I thought it would be a great adventure, and yeah, it was just a really good, uplifting experience to start off with. And it was nice that there were only a small group of people there, because you got quite friendly straight away with everybody. And I remember I have one vivid memory of the MTC, which was we were all there one time. It was coming to the end of the 12 days, and we were I think we were singing "I Believe in Christ," and for some reason I just started crying. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't blubbering or anything, but I had tears rolling down my face, and I felt the spirit quite strongly at that point. And that was kind of the start of, for me, to kind of think, well, actually there is a lot more to it than just an adventure, really.
Oh, definitely.
It was a great experience.
Um, the end of my MTC experience, they showed us the Joseph Smith, the Prophet of the Restoration DVD. And there was 16 of us that were going to Scotland. The whole group was, I think, 63 or something like that. And we had quite a decent group that were going to Scotland. And after they'd showed that video, all 16 were just in floods of tears after a very spiritual time in the MTC. And then you just feel so completely spiritually ready to get out there and serve. So who did you serve with then? What day of the week did you go to the MTC? Do you remember that?
I can't remember, actually.
He remembers when he gets back. So yeah, so go on. So who was your companion? Any thoughts or memories of who you served with?
What, in the MTC?
Yeah.
So yeah, I remember we had a dorm room, and there must have been. It was quite funny, actually, because so my MTC companion was a lad called Elder Han, Daniel Han. In fact, he became one of my companions in the mission field as well. So he was from a place called, well, Dumfries in Galloway,
Yeah.
in Scotland.
On the borders.
You what? Sorry.
It's on the borders, isn't it? In Dumfries, right there in the south of Scotland.
Yeah. So I served with him, and then we had I think there were about 8 of us in this dormitory.
Yeah.
And one of the lads, there were 2 lads that went to Africa. One of them was Andrew Howard, I think his name was. And I actually ended up serving in his home ward and having dinner at his house, which was a little bit weird.
It's nice for the family though, isn't it, when they have their contact with somebody that's been away. Cool. So that's your MTC experience. And for me, when I was in the MTC, it's all preach my gospel. And it's weird because I've listened to a few of these missionary podcasts from before my time. And I think it was just the transition year where they were going from whatever they were doing before into preach my gospel. For me, preach my gospel's been, missionary handbook for forever. What were they teaching you? How were you prepared to go out there and convert the masses?
Yeah, so we had 6 set discussions to learn. And we basically we had these booklets. Each discussion was, you had to do them in order as well. And each discussion, you had to basically memorize it and at least familiarize yourself with it so that you were comfortable teaching people about it. So yeah, it was all literally around that, and then trying to learn some of the scriptures that went with that as well.
Cool.
I mean, the first discussion, for instance, would have talked about Joseph Smith, the first vision, introducing them to the Book of Mormon and that sort of thing. Really, the fact that we've got continued revelation today.
And then, did you have like specific invitations that you'd have to do at the end of each lesson, or?
So technically, they wanted you. So I don't know what it was like later on, but technically, the goal, I suppose, was to find a convert, teach them all 6 discussions, and get them baptized within 3 weeks. That was the gold standard. That was the aim, and they wanted you basically, if you could get a commitment for baptism on the very first lesson. I very rarely ask people if, in fact, I can't even remember doing it once. I personally didn't agree with that, thinking that that was the right thing to do. So I kind of did my own thing on that respect.
You get baptized sometime, doesn't matter.
I
No.
just thought it was better for them to kind of get used to it and feel the spirit,
Oh yeah.
identify what that was before you kind of started committing them to, I didn't want to put them off straight away, really.
You gotta kind of assess where they're at and their level and
Yeah.
the timeline that meets those needs, I suppose. If for us, our mission changed drastically from when I was there to probably something similar to, you know, just slowly to a big emphasis on following those invitations and getting people invited early on. It made a big difference. But there were probably some people that were baptized that perhaps needed a little bit longer. But it's just interesting for me just to know the differences between how it was done before versus how we did it and our interpretation of different things. I suppose it's different mission by mission. That's cool. Okay, so how did you get to Leeds? Talk us through your journey to Leeds and then receiving your trainer and go from there.
Right. So I mentioned when I got to the MTC, I was really excited and I said goodbye to my parents without an issue. As soon as I left the MTC, that's the first time I can ever experience of being homesick. And it literally hit me like a brick wall. Um, and yeah, so there were a small group of us. I think there must have been about 4 or 5 of us, maybe, that were traveling up to Leeds and served in the Leeds mission. And we went by coach, which was a little bit perplexing, really, because the people in the missionaries that are going to Manchester flew up there, and we drove up by coach. And my first experience of the mission president, which was Elder Wigglesworth, was when we got off the coach, he told us all off for not having our name badges on our coats. And that was my first experience of him, meeting him, getting told off straight away. So I just thought, right, well,
Great start.
this is going to go well. But yeah, I'd probably been to York once. I'd never really been to Yorkshire. So for me, I mean, it was literally the next mission up. The Leeds mission borders onto the Birmingham mission. But I hadn't really been anywhere in the Leeds mission before, so it might as well have been a foreign country as far as I was concerned, because it's not like I was going to bump into any people. So,
and it's full of Yorkshire folk as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's a good
definitely
thing.
foreign.
Actually, I love Yorkshire now. I was saying this to my wife the other day. If I could live anywhere in England now, I would live in Yorkshire. I love Yorkshire.
Yeah, good. So President Wigglesworth, that's not a it's a pretty unique name, isn't it?
Yeah.
My MTC president was President Winwood, and then his first councillor was the President Wigglesworth. So I wonder if it was the same.
Well, I know that they did end up in the MTC as well at one
I
point.
bet that's the same. There we go. Small world. Yeah,
Keith Wigglesworth was his name.
yeah. Good chap. Very nice. Very
Yeah, lovely
nice.
bloke, and his wife, lovely people.
Cool. So you got there. You got told off for not having your badge on. And then, did they have any traditions in Scotland? They have this amazing tradition. I thought every mission would have something similar, where Parley P. Pratt went up to Arthur's Seat, at the top of Edinburgh, and he dedicated his mission there when he served his mission. And so that's what every missionary does before they start. They'll take the whole group up and they'll take them and they'll pray and they'll dedicate their mission and service before they start. Anything like that with you guys, or just straight to the Dales?
No, we went to TSB, the bank. we were given our bank cards,
Yeah.
and they wanted us to use the bank card, so we knew how to get money out of the cash machines. And we probably spent about half an hour just doing some street contacting around that area of Leeds, of Gosforth in Leeds. And that was it, really. And then we went back to the mission office and we had interviews with President Wigglesworth as well. And like I said, I just remember sitting there. I think the assistants were there and they put this video on. I think it was just to kind of kill a little bit of time for us. I was sat there just feeling really homesick, and they put this video on, and I can still remember it now. It was about this bloke that walks up into this mountain, and then there's a snake up there, and the snake wants to get down, and he's like, oh, well, the snake's talking to him. Well, that should have been his first cause for alarm. The snake asks him to carry him down. He's like, no, but you're a snake, you're going to bite me. Oh, I promise I won't bite you. And then you've seen the film.
I've seen the video. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
So they had that video on there, and then I
For
went
those
in.
listening at home, he gets to the bottom, the snake bites him.
Yeah, sorry, I should have.
You gave the story and didn't. Sorry, go on. So you're watching that video.
Yeah, so after that video, I'm still feeling horrible, that I wanted to go home and so on. And then I remember my very first interview with President Wigglesworth, and it makes sense actually. The conversation that we had makes sense afterwards, just because, well, he pulled me into his office. He showed me the map of the UK. Said, Elder Fisher, you live here, and the mission boundary is here, basically just after Nottingham. Nottingham is in the Birmingham mission, and just north of Nottingham is the start of the Leeds mission. He said, I want to make sure, he said, well, he just said, you live here, the mission boundary is here. And then he turned to me, almost yelling, and he's like, don't you dare think about going home within the next 2 years. I was like, okay, I won't. I promise I won't. So he said, I want to know for sure that if I put you in one of these areas that you're not going to be tempted to go home.
Yeah.
And I basically had to promise him that I wouldn't go home. Feeling crap, I already felt like I wanted to go home, but I made that promise to him. And I now know why he was probably quite strict on that, was because my very first area was Sutton in Ashfield, which was right by Nottingham. So my first area bordered the Birmingham mission. I probably at that point I was about 60 miles from home.
Yeah. So it'd been very easy just to have a weak moment and just nip across home, I suppose. That's very close, isn't it? 60 miles.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So that was your welcome to the mission. Don't you dare go home.
Yeah.
He saw you for who you were, without the tag on. He was worried about you from the start. I can tell. So then, how did go from there? Then, so trainers, how did that all get organised? And talk us through your areas.
Okay. So if I look like I'm looking away from the screen, I am. I've made a few notes.
You've got a cheat sheet. I like a cheat sheet.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first area, so I had 9 areas in 2 years, and I wasn't a problem missionary or anything. It was just that's the way that they did it. So the tradition within the Leeds mission to start off with was, as a greenie, you would basically in your first area for 2 months. 95% of everybody, this applied to basically everybody. So you're in your first area for 2 months, and then they got you straight away into another area, just so you didn't feel like you didn't have that greenie kind of label over your head, I suppose. So in April till May of 94, I served in Sutton and Ashfield, and I was trained by Elder Paul. I'll talk more about him in a couple of minutes. He was a fantastic missionary. We were in a 4-man flat at the time, and I love 4-man flats. It was just great just to have that camaraderie with other missionaries there as well. So that was with Kim Mahaffey and Todd Dawson. And then my second area was Halifax. So I was there from June 94 to August of 94 with an Irish missionary, Elder Keith O'Toole, and then Elder Chet Olson from Bountiful, Utah. And then my third area for Selby, I was only there again for 2 months. I served with a Swedish missionary, Krista Tegman. And then in November till January of 95, I served in Stanley in County Durham. So I had two companions there. Corey Nelson from America. I can't remember all the places where they all lived, sorry. And Julian Eady, he was an English missionary. In fact, he's living in Stanley right now.
Uh-huh.
He married a girl up there. Then my next area was Scunthorpe. I was only there for 2 months. I served with Daniel Han, who was my MTC companion. So I was there from February to March of 95. And then I went back to Gateshead. So Gateshead is in the same district as Stanley in County Durham. So I went there and I was there for 3 months, April till June, serving with Elder Curtis Smith from Utah and Elder Rolf Hufkes from Germany. And then my longest area was a 4-month area. And I think I was only there for 4 months because I ended up training in that time as well while I was there. So I was there in the summer of 95. So from July to October. I started off with Alan Venables, who was also in the MTC at the same time with me. So we were in the same dorm room there. And then I trained a missionary called Kevin Lunt. He was from Verdun, New Mexico. I can tell you more about him in a few minutes. He was quite a character. And then I moved to Workington for 2 months from November to December of 1995. I was in Workington, which is right up. Actually, Workington is now in the Manchester Mission. But back then it was, so it covered kind of like Keswick, the Lake District, that sort of area, Carlisle.
Yeah.
All that sort of area. Carlisle was in the same district as Workington. So there I served with Stephen Forey and then Brandon Miner, and they're both American. And we lived with a missionary couple, and it was great. It was like living with your grandparents. And they were the Hansons. So I was there from November to December. So we had Sunday dinners every Sunday, and we were there over Christmas. So they gave us Christmas presents, and it was fantastic. It was really good. And then the end of my mission, for the last 3 months, from January to March 96, I served in Sheffield, and again that was a 4-man flat as well. My companions were Brandon Gray and Aaron Olson, and again we served in a 4-man flat, as I mentioned just. And so Josh Romney, who is Mitt Romney's son.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He was there. There was and then 2 Scottish missionaries, Mark Veal and Colin Stewart. And that was kind of my whole missionary experience in a nutshell there, really.
That's a lot of companions.
Yeah.
I know you're saying you weren't a proper missionary, but I love how you had to tell us that. Promise,
Well,
promise I wasn't.
I had to stipulate that just because, I mean, in the mission that we're in, I mean, we're both in the same ward, and in the Manchester mission, it's not unheard of for people to stay there for like 6 months. Well, that was unheard of and I don't know if it's just the mission or if it's the mission president or what. I don't know.
Yeah, I was telling you before, I was zone leader in Glasgow for 10 months, and that was after I'd been in a different area in that same ward for 3 months. So I was in that one ward for 13 months. I was in Edinburgh for 10 months. And then the rest of the time I was in Aberdeen. So it's so weird just when people go all these different areas. That was not my experience at all. So it's interesting. So go on, crack on. Tell us some stories. Let's start at the beginning with your trainer.
Well, before I do that, it is weird because I mentioned that I felt homesick when I left the MTC.
Yeah.
And for the first year of my mission, every time I moved area for a day, I felt homesick.
Yeah.
I realized I wasn't missing home. It was just that newness, that change.
Yeah.
But then I noticed that after a year, change didn't affect me whatsoever. You know, I just carried on. It was just part and parcel of it, really. So it is funny how you do get used to to change and to just the circumstances that you're in, really.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got a mixture of funny stories and some more kind of spiritually uplifting stories. There's no rhyme or reason to them. I'll just tell them as they happened in the different areas, if you'd like.
Yeah, go for it. It's your time. Do what you want with it.
Okay, so first of all, my trainer, Travis Poll, he's a fantastic missionary. I remember quite clearly him picking me up from the MTC, sorry, not the MTC, the mission office. And we took a train back to Sutton in Ashfield. And I remember just saying to him, because I felt horrible at this time, I was really, really homesick. My only experience of the mission president was that he shouted at me twice. Yeah, and I just thought, I just don't know if I can cope with this really. So what the first question that I asked him was, does the 2 years go fast? Does it go quick? And he said, honestly, it will fly by. I mean, it does. I mean, like I've said to you, I've been home 27 years now. It's just been crazy. Um, so he sadly passed away. He had throat cancer, and he sadly passed away. Now we went on a family holiday to America in August of 2009. Uh, my wife's got some family in Idaho, so we stopped off at did a we spent probably about 3 or 4 days in Utah first, and then went over to Idaho. So I got in contact with him, and I had the opportunity of going over to his house, and I knew he'd suffered with health problems. I didn't know at the time that it was terminal, but I knew that it was touch and go for him at certain points. So we just spent an afternoon at his house one time, and he was fantastic. It was lovely to see him and his wife, and he got some young children as well. And then I learned shortly after that they passed away, so I was really sorry to hear that. But he was a remarkable missionary, and I'm telling you this because actually the first experience wouldn't have happened without him. So one Saturday afternoon, we were walking down this street on a Saturday afternoon. We had a call back to go to somebody's house, and as we were walking down this kind of, it was like a high street, I looked over the other side of the road, and there was this man in the doorway of a shop. He had a woolly hat on, and he was drinking alcohol. And I feel a little bit ashamed of saying this, but straight away I just thought, what a waster. I was probably not the most compassionate of people, a little bit arrogant, if I'm being completely honest. And I just thought, what a waster. Anyway, we walked past, and we ended up knocking on the door of this lady's house who we had this call back for, but she wasn't in. So we now found ourselves on the same side of the road that this man was in the doorway of the shop. As we walked past him, uh, my trainer, Elder Paul, decided to stop and talk with him. So we ended up sat in the doorway of a shop, and we taught him a first discussion. Halfway through the discussion, he got up and he went to the pub, and he came back with another bottle of beer. And I just thought, I can't believe we're doing this. What are we doing? This is stupid. But we taught him, and then, as I mentioned to you previously, we explained to him that we have these 6 set discussions that we wanted to share with him. Straight away, he said, "Why would you want to waste your time on somebody like me?" And I was ashamed to think, well, that's exactly what I was thinking as well. But yeah, we got a call back, and we ended up going to his house. And even walking to his house that one day, I just thought, this is a waste of time. He's probably not even going to be in. And if I'm being completely honest, and I don't feel proud of this at all, I kind of hope that he wasn't in. I know that sounds horrible, but that's just kind of the way that it was. Anyway, he was in, and we taught him. Found out that he'd been in prison for GBH, and so on. So, but he was one of the first people that that we baptized. I was only there for 2 months, and before I left the area. So we had an interview with the mission president and so on. And before I left the area, he was baptized and was given the priesthood.
Amazing. That's kind of what Christ would do, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the reason I mentioned this, and the reason it stuck out in my mind, is his name was Danny Gents. And the reason it stuck out in my mind is just because, I'm glad that was a real learning experience for me. And it really taught me not to judge people based on their appearance. And I'm really glad that I had that experience right at the very beginning of my mission, just because it framed the rest of my mission. I would have probably been a completely different missionary, had a completely different experiences, if that experience hadn't have happened right at the very beginning of my mission. I'd like to think I lost that arrogance. I mean, obviously I was still an 19, 20-year-old lad. But it did kind of frame the rest of my mission. And I'm really glad that I had that experience. And again, that just shows you kind of the type of compassion that this Travis Poll had. And it's just a real shame that he's no longer with us, really. The other experience that happened in this area, in fact, this was the very first baptism that I had. I don't remember the names of everybody that I baptized, but this lady's name was Natasha Almond. So I was on splits one time with the zone leader, and we were doing this lost sheep program. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that at all. It's where you're just trying to identify people who are on the records of the church who are no longer in that area. We spent probably a couple of hours tracting without any success, and then he said, okay, we've got time to knock on one more door. Have you ever done spiritual tracting before? And I said, I've got no idea what you're talking about. He said, right, well, as we walk back to the car, we're going to walk down the street. I just want you to, we've only got time to knock on one more door, but if you feel prompted to knock on, well, any particular door in the street, just knock on that door. So about halfway down the street, I felt prompted to knock on this one door. So I knocked on this door, and this lady, Natasha, answered the door. And she was the very first person that we baptized as on my mission. And again, I just thought, it just shows, I mean, that's the only door we knocked on in the street, and it wasn't as if it was a small street either. And it just shows you that these things, a lot of people would say it was a coincidence, but it just shows you that it happens too frequently for it to be a coincidence, really.
Oh, 100%. I have to repent a little bit of this. One of the stories I shared on my podcast was my second companion in Aberdeen is a guy called Chris Harlow, and he's from Leeds way, and he was very different than my trainer. My trainer was just like knock, 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 German guy, knock loads of doors. And for me, it was a very different approach. One of the things that he'd like to do is get the map of Aberdeen out. Right, it was like, you pray and I pray, and on this map we'll come up with 3 streets that we both feel good about. There must be like 50,000 streets in Aberdeen, and he wants me to get the same as he gets. So it would take us about an hour and a half to get these streets right, and I was done with that. We weren't doing that. I'm not spending an hour and a half every day working out where we're going to go. And so I spoke about that on this podcast, and the amount of people that had gone afterwards on their podcasts who've had similar experiences to yours, where they just said, right, we just prayed, we both felt good about this street, went to that street, and that person got baptized, or they just were going somewhere, just felt prompted to knock on that door. It's not a coincidence. The Lord's in the work, and things like that. Just for me, it's not. You can say it's a coincidence, but it's not, because the amount of doors that you probably knocked on, that you perhaps weren't guided to, and you were just throwing out that net and see what you caught, versus that targeted approach. There's no way it's a coincidence. Never.
I agree. I totally agree with you. Are you ready for another story?
Yeah, sorry. Just chipping in. I had to do my repentance bit.
No, that's fine. So this is more of a light-hearted story. So I was in my third area in Selby, and I was with this Swedish missionary at the time. So we were street contacting. So we stopped this old lady in the street, and she agreed for us to go around to her house to basically teach her a discussion. So we didn't do it there and then, but we arranged time to pop round. So we were let in and started talking to this old lady, and we started teaching her about Joseph Smith and the first vision. And then she said, can I just stop you there, and I want to tell you an experience that I had. So in Selby at the time, they didn't have a building of their own. They lived in they didn't live. they went to church at the local community centre, and this community centre was just over the road from where this lady lived. So we shared this story about the first vision with her, and she said, "Oh, can I just stop you there? This is an experience that happened to me." She said, "I went to my auntie's house in the countryside, and I was feeling sick, so I went to bed." And she said, and as I lay down in my bed, my stomach started convulsing up and down. And she said, so I put my hand on my stomach to stop myself being sick. And this great energy surge rushed into my head. And she said, and then I turned into a shadow beast. And then she gets up, this little old lady, she gets up out of a chair, and then she starts walking around the room like this. And I'm kind of sat there just in one side, just doing this away from her, just to try and make my companion laugh. And she said, I was walking around the room like this, and she said, I could see the flames coming out of my mouth, And then she said, I heard a voice. I was asking for help. She said, and I heard a voice say, put your hand on your hip. She said, but I couldn't see my hand because it was this big paw with claws. So eventually I found my hand and I put it on my hip and I turned back to normal. And I was thinking, I don't think you've ever been normal. She then said, I woke up the next morning and I looked over to where the voice had come from that told me to put my hand on my hip. And there was a bed there, but there was nobody in the bed. And I said, well, that's a little bit strange, really. If and she said, I keep hearing all these voices and they're not very nice voices. They keep putting me down. So well, what do they tell you? And she said, well, they told me to stand naked in front of the window and pray. And that's why I mentioned about the community center. So every now and then I just think, I wonder if there's a naked shadow beast praying in the window. Luckily we never saw one. But we didn't go back either. We felt as though we'd had enough of shadow beasts.
Sounded like she needed an exorcism.
I think so.
Yeah, not fancy that.
No, but it's not every day you get to speak to a shadow beast, really. So I just thought that, I mean, and something like that, 27 years ago, it still sticks in your mind. So I thought that was quite funny. I've got so there was another couple of instances. So I'll share this one with you actually. So I was in Gateshead. This was a nice experience actually. So first of all, let me explain. So with Gateshead, the district leader lived in Gateshead, and then they were the district leader over Stanley and Gateshead. So when I was serving in Stanley, we would go to the district leader's house sometimes, and I looked out one time, and so the way their house was, it was like terrace houses, but they had their garden, and then there was a grass verge strip with trees on at the back of that. And I looked out, and their garden wall had been kicked in. I was like, "Who's been kicking your garden wall down?" And he said, "Oh, we've got some neighbours." And these were, we talk about neighbours from hell. Well, this is what they would have been like. And they used to throw glass bottles over the fence and everything. Just not nice people. Anyway, after serving in Stanley, I served in Scunthorpe, and then I found myself living in Gateshead in this house. So yeah, so I remember, I mean, one night we walked back and we'd had half a house brick thrown through the living room window, and while we were waiting for people to come and fix the glass, I mean, this just shows the kind of people that they are. They actually came down to the window and said, "Oh, looks like you've had some problems here." Gateshead was one of the few areas, and I really loved the area, but it was one of the few flats that I slept with an iron bar under the bed. And I actually had an iron bar under the settee in the living room as well, just in case anything happened. But I heard this isn't the funny story that I was going to tell you, the spiritual story that I was going to tell you. I'm just looking at my notes. I'm going through this one first. So one night, I was there from April till June, and one night it was really hot, so we had the windows open at the back, and I heard this. I heard these people walking down this grass verge at the back, and they said, "Is this the house?" And I heard someone say, "No, this is where some students live," and I think they were talking about us. And then they knocked on. They went to the neighbor's house next door, and there was a load of yelling and shouting and everything, and it sounded like somebody had a gun, because they said, if don't do it, if you do it, you're going to go down for it, don't do it, and anything. Anyway, regardless of what happens, there was something that happened that night. Then the next morning I saw an ambulance pull up outside of their house, and I think he'd been stabbed in the leg or something, and he was going he was going into this ambulance to obviously go back to hospital to get checked out again from the night before. But I just thought, that's kind of like the character of that area. There is a funny twist to this. So as a result of all of this, we ended up moving from this house in I can't remember the name, the part of Glasgow. No, I was going to say Glasgow. Then the part of Gateshead. Um, but they ended up moving. I don't know if you know this, but Gateshead has one of the highest Jewish populations in the UK. And so the missionaries ended up moving right bang into the middle of this Jewish population. But the irony is, the missionary that I was serving with at the time was German.
Oh no.
I just thought the irony is not lost on me there. I never actually served in that area because I was moving out just as they were moving their house. But that was quite funny. But going back to the experience that I mentioned before about God being in the detail, we stopped this old man in the street and asked him if we could share some messages with him, share some discussions with him. So he gave us an address for us to go by. We knocked on this door expecting to speak to this man, and it ended up being this woman. So this man had actually given us a fake address. He didn't live there. He just made up I think he found it easier just to lie to us instead of just saying no, he's not interested. But we started talking to this lady, and we made an appointment to go back and talk to her. So when we went back, she turned around and said, I didn't want to tell you at the time. She said, but I'm actually a member of your church already, but I've not gone to church for years. And she said, I used to live in South Shields and I've lost contact with my family as well. But I've got my children haven't been baptized. I'd like to start coming back to church, and I'd like my children to hear the discussions. So we taught and baptized all three of her children, reactivated her. And I was a district leader at the time. So I got in contact with the zone leader over in South Shields, who located her brother, who was active in the church, and he came to the baptism as well. So from one man telling us a lie, we reactivated a lady, baptized her three children, and got her back into contact with her family.
Amazing.
And that just shows you, that we are literally just instruments. We are tools in Heavenly Father's hands. It wasn't because of us.
Yeah.
It was because of, as I mentioned before, God is in the details there. I just thought that wasn't a coincidence, really.
No, I think you just got to be doing something, and then the Lord will direct those things. And amazing experience. What a wonderful, success story from somebody lying to you.
Yeah, exactly.
That never happened to me.
That never happened to
No,
you.
when somebody lied to us, you just turn up, you just can't get abuse on the door.
Yeah.
Leeds must be a more godly mission than Scotland, maybe.
Maybe. Okay, so I have skipped past some a couple of instances that happened in Scunthorpe. I'll go to Bradford actually. So sometimes we used to have these referral cards, and they were basically like I can't even remember now. Families of Forever cards.
There's not like pass along cards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then if somebody's interested, they will fill the details in, get sent off, and then eventually finds its way back to the missionaries in the area that they're in. Well, we had these details this is in Bradford, so I was in a 4-man flat at the time. We had this referral come through. So the other missionaries said, okay, well, you and Elder Venables, it might have been at this time, you take this one. So we had this lady's name. We went to the address. This man answered the door, wiry hair, real bottle rim glasses, real thick glasses. And we said, I can't remember the name of the girl. I call her Sarah, for instance. Is Sarah in? We've got this card for her. So coming in. And it was one of these houses where the living room was upstairs. So we walked upstairs and went into the living room. He walks upstairs, comes into the living room, and the first thing he said to us was, is my wife's name? I can't remember what he said then, but it wasn't the name on this card. It wasn't Sarah. And I thought, well, this is a little bit strange. And we said no. So he just kind of chuckled to himself. And then he sits down and he said, I've got some messages I want to share with you. He said, I get all the messages that I have from the TV when the TV isn't on, all these signals come through. I thought, oh, we've got another nutter here. Now, because I wanted to make sure we were going to have a laugh about this afterwards with the other missionaries. So I just said to him, "Could you write these down for me?" He said, "No, my hand's paralyzed," but he was moving it. He said, "You'll have to do writing." So I got a pen and a piece of paper. The first thing he said to me was, "You get AIDS from drinking water."
Dear.
I said, "You get AIDS from drinking water?" He said, "Yeah, so I haven't had anything to eat for the last couple of weeks because it's all processed through water." I said, "Well, how are you surviving then?" He said, "Oh, I'm drinking tea and coffee." I thought, "Well, what's that made of?" And then he checked with me. He said, "Is that okay?" I said, "Well, if I were you, I would start eating again. Well, bless your food." And then we told him how to say a prayer and all this. I just thought, well, while we're here, we might as well turn it into a first discussion. So we taught him about Joseph Smith. He said, "Yeah, my mom was married to Joseph Smith." I said, "Oh, really? What's your mom's name?" And he said, he came up with some name. And I said, "Well, that's interesting because Joseph's wife's name was Emma." And he just kind of chuckled. At this point, I thought, well, we better be leaving now. So I explained that we had to go. As we were walking to go out of the living room, he said, "This is what happened to a friend of mine." And he points over to a photo of him in a park with a big stick in his mouth, holding onto this stick. He's like, with this stick. He's like, "This is what happened to a friend of mine." So I just thought, well, again, he was another one, kind of like the Shadow Beast that we didn't bother. I just thought it's one thing when you go looking for them, but when they start finding you, it's a little bit scary.
I think it's so interesting though, because in what other sphere or situation would you get a 19 or 20-year-old kid meeting just such a wide variety of people? You just wouldn't. And it's just great memories and experiences that you get, but also it's just learning opportunities, isn't it? As you meet different folk that you would just never ever come into contact with outside a mission environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that in mind, I mean, in Bradford at that time, there was a drought on. And in fact, I remember just clearly seeing all these water tankers, tanker after tanker, just going, filling up the reservoirs just because it was so dry and the reservoirs were depleting. So it was really hot.
So
And
this been
every day,
about 1995, would it be?
this was July to October of 95.
Yeah. I remember this. I remember the host pipe bands and stuff, but I was eight. I was eight
Yeah.
years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, I was 19, so or 20.
In
So
Bradford.
every day we would be tracting in this, and every day we saw this man, and he always seemed to be like, 300 yards away from us, but he would wear a monk's habit, like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
brown habit robes. In this heat, he wore that every day. They used to call him Friar John. And I never managed to catch up with him. I'd have loved to have just had a chat with him just to see where he used to
See
go.
what his deal is.
Yeah, we always used to see him just walking up this hill, but he was like always up too far ahead of us to catch him. But we saw him most days. He was again a character that I would love to have just kind of stopped and had a chat with. But I trained in that area. Uh, this was one of the few areas I didn't have any baptisms in, and I worked as much as I could in that area because obviously I trained and I wanted to set a good example for this Elder Lunt, his name was. When I picked him up in the mission office, we just had a meeting with the mission president. He was saying how important it is that you keep to the mission rules and you do everything that you can and so on. And they brought us into this room, and all the new missionaries, all the elders and the sisters, all just sat looking a little bit apprehensive. And I looked at this one lad. He was 22 stones and he had red curlyish hair, and I just thought I want to serve him. I want to serve with him. And I ended up serving with him. I was literally 11 stone at the time. He was twice my weight. He squeezed me that hard when we hugged each other at the beginning. He squeezed me that hard, it gave me a headache. But my goal was to make him sweat on his forehead every day that I was with him, and it's quite easy to do anyway because it was so hot. but I would march him up these hills because Bradford's quite a hilly place as well. I would march him up and down these hills uh, until I saw this sweat going. At least then I knew that I'd achieved something that day, even if we didn't end up baptizing anybody. I wanted it to get him into the habit of what hard work was like.
And
But
was he 22 stone by the end of it?
he'd lost a little bit of weight. I mean,
Okay.
still he was still a lot bigger than me, but yeah, he was a really good missionary. Um, so those were kind of like my spiritual experiences and some funny examples. Um, I've just kind of, I suppose, to wrap up with really just I'm thinking of Sheffield, my last area. From my experience, you had missionaries, and I wasn't a perfect missionary by any stretch of the imagination, and I don't want it to come across that that was the case. But from my observations before, missionaries either leave the mission in two ways. They either go out in a blaze of glory, do the best that they can, or they kind of just fizzle out, and they get trunky and they can't wait to get home, and they don't do very much in the last few months of the mission. I didn't want to be like that. I wanted to be, and like I said, I wasn't perfect or anything like that, but I wanted to be one of those missionaries that went out in that blaze of glory, really. And I remember sitting in a zone conference just prior to going home, and the mission president stood there and he was talking about organizing some battalions, and he said, these battalions, you're going to have to achieve certain you're going to have to achieve certain things, certain targets. And if you achieve these targets, you will be listed in this battalion. So there were four of them. The first one was to teach 10 discussions in a day, in one day. Another one was to teach 30 discussions in 1 week. Another one was to add 10 investigators to your teaching pool. And the other one, I forgot how many Book of Mormons it was, but to place so many Book of Mormons in a week. And I set myself a goal to actually be in each of those four battalions before the end of my mission. And I worked as much as I could. And I managed to get in every single one just before I went home. And you got a certificate for it and all of that. And it for me, I mean, the certificate didn't really mean anything to anybody outside of anybody looking at. I mean, I've actually got them now, which is why I could remember what the battalions were. But it didn't mean anything to anybody else. It was just a piece of paper to them. But to me, it was quite important that I achieved that battalion before I got home off my mission. And I was really pleased to say that I managed to do that.
You finished
Uh,
strong.
yeah, and I just think that was it. It was important for me to do that. And when I look back on my mission, it's I had a fantastic experience. I mentioned to you already that I found a little poem that I wanted to read because it kind of sums up what a mission is, and it certainly sums up what a mission is to me. I didn't write this. In fact, if there is anybody that's going to listen to this podcast, then they've probably heard this already. But I don't apologize for sharing it because I think it's fantastic, and I just wanted to share this with you, if that's all right.
Go for it.
It says, a mission is a strange experience. It is a trial and a test. A mission throws at you the worst, yet teaches you the best. I've never been so happy. I've never been so depressed. I've never felt so forsaken. I've never felt so blessed. I've never been so confused. Things have never been so clear. I've never felt my Heavenly Father so distant. He's never been so near. I've never been so discouraged. I've never been so full of hope. I feel I could go on forever. I think I've come to the end of my rope. I've never had it quite so easy. I've never had it quite so tough. Things have never been so smooth. Things have never been so rough. I've never traveled through more valleys. I've never ascended more peaks. I've never met so many nice people. I've never met so many freaks. I've never had so many ups. I've never had so many downs. I've never worn so many smiles. I've never worn so many frowns. I've never been so lonely. I've never had so many friends. Boy, I hope this is over soon. Gosh, I hope this never ends. I mentioned to you at the beginning of my mission, I was, well, I didn't perhaps say this bit, but I remember getting one of the first letters in my first area in Sutton and Ashfield from my parents, and I burst into tears just because I was feeling that homesick, that uh, ready to go. The way I overcame that was I decided to give myself 6 months, and I knew I just thought I'll forget about this now. I'll do the best I can, and if I still feel this way after 6 months, but it was just kind of like my get out clause, really. So I did everything I could in that 6 months, and by the time that came around, I was loving my mission. So I was in tears at the beginning of my mission, and I was also in tears at the end of my mission as well, just because well, at that point, I, I remember being in the mission home, just waiting. My parents came back up to the mission office to pick me up, so I stayed the night. My last night of my mission was in the mission home, and I remember just sitting on my own in the living room on that morning. I just thought, I'm not ready to go home now. In fact, I could see my parents, and I'd be happy to do another 2 years. That was just the way that I felt, really. And it was such a great experience, that 2 years for me. Like I mentioned to you at the beginning, I went I went on my mission for an adventure, if nothing else, and I certainly had a fantastic adventure. But what I also had from there was gained from there was a testimony. Um, every time I taught people about the principles, the lessons in these discussions, when I was sharing my testimony to them, I was getting that testimony reaffirmed to me as well. And that kind of has stood me in good stead for the last 27 years of being home as well. So I know some people have a tough time on the missions. I wasn't one of those individuals. I look back on my mission as they call it the best 2 years. Um, and it certainly was the best 2 years that I'd experienced up to that point. And I still now think back quite fondly of my mission and still reflect on a lot of things, on a fairly regular basis. Memories will just pop into my head, or thoughts of certain companions or other missionaries that I came across. The camaraderie that you have as missionaries is very difficult to kind of explain it to people who haven't been through it, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to kind of close really just by saying I've for me, I wouldn't have chosen to go any other place in the world, because it would have meant that I didn't have the experiences that I had, or met the people that I met. And for me, that's what it was all about.
Brilliant. Now, you've already mentioned a few things. One of the things that I noted when you were speaking was that, every time you changed an area, you felt homesick or anxious, or whatever it might be. And then after a year or so of changing, because you were a problem missionary, with all those changes, you just kind of stop feeling like that. And life is full of changes, and that's something that would have equipped you for those changes, getting married or having a child or moving home or changing jobs. um for me, you've spoken about some of your areas. Some of your areas, you confuse Gateshead with Glasgow, but it sounded a bit like Glasgow, some of those experiences. But just being in situations I would never ever be in, knocking on brothel doors, not realizing that there were brothels, and walking into crack dens, not entirely sure what you were in until afterwards. Just stuff that you would never do.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, what lessons, or what are the benefits that you felt since serving your mission, that you felt that have helped you in your life, in your career, in your family? Because for me, everything that is good in my life has come as a consequence of serving my mission. And I can almost pinpoint lessons that I've learned in certain areas that have allowed me to do things that I've done in life. So for you, what would you say those biggest benefits were, or the best life lessons that you learned as a consequence of serving the mission? on top of obviously the spiritual, the testimony, and those kind of things.
Yeah, well, like you said before about the change, I mean, it got to a point where after a year, I was absolutely fine with change. In fact, I used to just take it in my stride. It was just part and parcel of things, and like you said, change comes in many forms now. It's not just that you're moving area. It's, when you get home and you get married, that's a change. When you start a new job, that's a change. You have kids, that's a change. Your life is constantly just uh, a load of different changes all put together, and it's just how you deal with those changes. So that was a really good lesson for me to start off with, to know that actually when things do change and you're still fine with it, what it does do is it gives you a base level of confidence to know that actually, regardless of whatever comes my way, um, you're kind of equipped to deal with it. And if you're not equipped to deal with it, then you can learn the lessons that you need to then deal with it. So it gives you that little level of confidence that perhaps you would be missing if you didn't go through all of those experiences. Um, I mean, I know, like I said before, when I mentioned to you before, I clearly felt as though for me I should forget about worrying about my career. I just knew that everything would work out. And after working at the church offices for 5 years and started working for this pharmaceutical company, well, I started working at Pfizer. Now, Pfizer is the largest pharmaceutical company in the world. And my initial interview with the manager, he knew I was a member of the church because my best friend at the time, it's not that we're not friends anymore. He's moved to New Zealand now.
But a new best friend.
My best friend at the time was a member of the church working for Pfizer, and his brother-in-law was also a member of the church and worked for Pfizer. So this manager knew these two people. He knew they'd been on missions, and he held them in high regard. So when I came along, I kind of already had the advantage over other people because he saw me in the same way that he saw them, because he knew that I was a member of the church and that I'd served a mission. And I remember him talking to me, and I didn't have any sales experience. Now, at that point, if you don't have any sales experience, they're probably not interested in you. But what I was able to do was to relate kind of like the similarities between what I do now as a job and being a missionary, which is that you build those relationships of trust with that individual. You build that rapport with the individual, and then you work on kind of like the commitment pattern that we have in the mission. You work on those areas that they're struggling with, and then you keep going back to check that everything's fine. We didn't testify to them, but we told them of what it was that we needed.
Benefits, yeah.
Yeah, the benefits of doing what we're asking to do. And so I probably wouldn't be in the career that I'm in now if I hadn't have served my mission. And it's just every little thing that kind of happens for a reason, really. And yeah, it's just there's lots of instances. Not only, I mean, I quite like personal development, and I keep thinking, I'm a big believer in that. You want to try and better yourself, and you have to work on yourself before you can. It's like throwing that pebble into a pond. You throw that pebble in, and then the ripples go out. You have to work on yourself first, that pebble, before you can work on anybody else. And again, that's something that you learn as a missionary, because you have to be doing the things right first before you can influence other people to do what it is that you want as well. And they're just good life experiences, really.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, my experience at the very beginning of my mission is the same as yours. The MTC was amazing. It's like that spiritual high for I don't know how long you were there, for 2 weeks for us, or 10 days or whatever it was. And as soon as I got to Aberdeen, it was the nastiest, grottiest, most horrible flat. Some of the missionary flats tended to be that.
Yeah.
And I just felt so awful, to the point where in the first 2 days I'd called my dad and told him to come and could he come and drive and get me and take me home. Not everybody knows that. And my dad basically just said no, and that was that. Not coming to get you. And at that point, I'm kind of stuck there, and it was really like a really difficult probably 6 to 8 months for me. Now, I often wonder how my life would have gone if I'd come home in that first 2 days, and what ramifications that would have had. The lessons I wouldn't have learned, the people I wouldn't have met, the spiritual conversion that I wouldn't have had, the deep roots of testimony that I wouldn't have gained. And I think, missions are they're just an anchor, aren't they, for life, I think.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And not only that, but you're benefiting everybody else that you come in contact with
Yeah.
if they listen to you.
Yeah, if they listen to you. Fantastic. Right. So we've come to the end there. Is there anything else? Any of the stories that come to mind? Because you'll finish this and you'll be like, oh, I wish I'd said that, or I wish I'd mentioned that person. Anything else that comes to mind that you want to share before you round up this oral history of your mission?
No, I think I mean it's very difficult to kind of encapsulate 2 years of experiences and everything into like an hour and a half or however long we've been. I said to you before, I'll be
Half
done
an
in
hour.
half an hour.
So there's no way you'll be just getting started at half an hour.
Yeah, so it is very difficult to encapsulate, a whole 2 years in one. And it's just silly little things that wouldn't necessarily mean anything to anybody else. I'll give you one more example. Um, so, and it's just these are the sort of things that will pop into your head from time to time. So when I lived in Bradford, I was in a 4-man flat, and the four missionaries, we were at somebody's house for dinner all together one time, and we were talking about funny little things that we did back home, funny stories. One of the missionaries, Elder Mayfield, Nate Mayfield, we have the same birthday, which I thought was quite funny, 19th of February. He's just a year younger than me. He was saying that he used to, or his brother used to get a piece of cotton and tie a wig. I could do with it now, actually. Tie a wig on with this piece of cotton and just pull it across the road when a car was coming, because it would look like a cat was running across the road. And we were all laughing about this, and I just said, "That's hilarious. We'll have to do something like that one time." Um, he burst through the door one time and he shouted upstairs, "Fisher, Fisher, look what I've got!" And I went to the bottom to the stairs, and he was stood at the foot of the stairs with a doll's head. What have you got a doll's head? He said, "Well, we can turn it upside down. You just got the hair on the back." And I was like, that's hilarious. We're gonna have to do something with that. So we lived on a street. I had I had like a sewing kit or something, and we had some fishing line anyway. So we attached some fishing line to this doll's head, turned it upside down so you just saw the hair, put it in the went outside. It was dark. Put it on the far side of the road, and then as a car would come up, we'd start pulling pulling this string, so it would look like this creature of some kind was just across the road. And these are just the stupid things that you do. So one time we did this, we put it in the road and we were pulling it across, and as a car was coming up, anyway, we didn't realize it was a neighbor's car. So as they pulled up, they actually pulled in the driveway opposite us. So I ran down the side of the house just so they couldn't see us, they couldn't see me. This other elder was just hid behind this car, just hoping that they got out and left. Anyway, you must have seen this. I think the doll's head flipped over the other way while we were pulling it. So you just saw the face of this doll's head moving across the road. I left it like 3 or 4 minutes. I thought, oh, he's probably gone in the house now. So I walked back up the side of our house. He'd only just got out of the car. So I then pretended to be locking the car, although I didn't have any keys on me. And then I thought, right, well, I'll then pretend to be tying my shoe all the time. I'm just trying to, and he's looking in the road to see what it was that they'd been missing, and this other elders kind of, and I'm feeling really uncomfortable at this point. This other elders just kind of hid behind his car, just laughing to himself. But these are just kind of the dumb things that you do sometimes as a 20-year-old or whatever. Um, I mean, I don't know what the neighbors would have thought of all of this, but sometimes these are the things that you look back on and you just think, how often would I have done that before? I mean, these are just stupid things that you do sometimes. But it's just funny, and I've got 2 years of experiences like that, which makes it great. My philosophy is that, and it's I mean, everybody says it: work hard, play hard, but I think it is if you have, put the work in, but also enjoy what you're doing as well, because then you'll enjoy it. You'll have far better experience. And yeah, you'll just have some fantastic memories when you come home.
Brilliant. Well, what a great story to finish on. Brilliant. Okay, so anybody that you'd like to shout out, who you'd like to hear from next? You've done your episode. I've been hounding you for ages for it. So whose stories would you like to hear next?
Well, I mean, if we're staying in the crew ward, we've
Yeah.
got quite a few. I'd say Dave Lear would be a good
Yeah,
one to listen to, or Dwayne. I believe Dwayne served a mission as well.
we did. I spoke to Dwayne. I'm hoping he'll come. We'll only speak to Dave Lear as well. Get him on.
Yeah. I think they would be quite good interviews to listen to.
Cool. So Dave and Dwayne.
Yeah.
I spoke to Dwayne and he was quite grumpy about his mission, so I definitely want to hear it. So I didn't
I'm
I didn't
sure we
have a
can
good
pull
time on
something.
my mission. So maybe you should look back and have a look and see what good times he's had.
Yeah. Give him some rose-colored glasses.
Yeah, yeah, which surprised me because he's not a grumpy chap. So I'm quite interested to hear what's happened on his mission.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. Right, we'll get in touch with Dwayne and Dave. And yes, all I ask of you is pop this on your Facebook. People that you served around, maybe share with them that you've done this, and maybe they'll do something in their awards as well, kind of an award oral history about the missionaries that you've been on. I found that when I was doing it, for me, the amount of people then that I got back in touch with that I haven't spoken to for a long time, it was just really good to reminisce and think about the stories that we shared together. So yeah, that'd be good if you can share that with people that you'd been around, and that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, that's fine. I have left out any incriminating evidence for
Yeah,
any, so that's fine.
probably for the best.
Probably.
They can all deny it though. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it, and we'll let you get back to your family in your. It's Boxing Day today, so appreciate the time that you've spent. And yeah, till next time, till episode 3.
Yeah,
Thanks,
no
Andrew.
problem.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.